The following is a production of the Dallas Genealogical Society. For more information, please visit our website at dallasgenealogy.org.
Thanks, Barry. You. Larry is a retired U.S. Army captain with 23 years in aviation and transportation and logistics. He has a bachelor's degree in aviation maintenance management, an FAA airline mechanic license, an MBA in MIS, and a project management professional certification. He began his genealogy research in the 80s with his Thomas family, Georgia residents since the 1750s. Then he expanded into his and his late wife's families. He began client research in 2008 and presenting in 2015 and has a website, atlantagenealogy.com. A ProGen 38 graduate, he is the current president of the Genealogical Speakers Guild, a member of numerous genealogical and historical societies, and serves on several boards. Larry also occasionally works for the TV show Finding Your Roots and was credited on the Julia Roberts and the Terry Crews episodes. Welcome, Larry.
Thank you. Appreciate it, everybody. While I get the screen share going. So hopefully everybody can see my screen. Yes?
Not though. There we go.
Are we good?
Good.
Okay. Let me tell you a little bit more about me, just to have an understanding of my background and where I've come from. I tell people I'm northern born, I'm southern bred. As you heard, my father and his line were Georgia residents since the 1750s. Mama was from Coleman, Alabama. That's near Huntsville. So it's all southern roots, but my parents met and married in Chicago. So I grew up in Chicago, raised by Southerners, drinking real tea, meaning it has sugar, eating grits, and all things Southern. The Army sent me to Atlanta in 96. In 98, they wanted me to go back to Chicago. I went, no, thank you. I'm going to stay where it's a whole lot warmer. I did spend my first tour was a place called Fort Bliss in El Paso, Texas, which we refer to as Clear Nelly because you're clear across and Nelly out of the state. 999 miles to get across Texas. Okay, but today we're going to talk about unlocking family history and researching courthouse records for genealogical discoveries. There is so much available in courthouses that people often overlook. This is being recorded by the society, but I ask you not to do screenshots to make your own private copy. I always start with a disclaimer, and this one is, history is what history was. We're genealogists, we're historians. We can't change the past, we can't whitewash it, we can't rewrite it, and we don't want to skip it. That's the key thing. We want to treat it in proper respect, with proper context, but we want to glean every bit of information we can get, because information is everything in what we're trying to do. Okay, so don't get offended when we come across words that no longer are considered proper today. I have met people who've been doing research for over 20 years and never once set foot in a courthouse. That might be explainable if you live in Washington and you're researching in Georgia. It might be kind of hard to get into a courthouse in Georgia. But if you can, want to get to the courthouse because not everything is online. Not everything was digitized. The LDS pick and choose what they're going to digitize and put online. So there's a lot of information. We're going to hit some of this stuff. And many people just want to get the will, the vital records, and the homestead deed. And I'm telling you, there's just so much more out there. We're going to concentrate primarily on the county courthouse and a little bit of the districts because Texas is aligned a little bit different than other ones. But bear in mind that there are some places like in Virginia where cities operate like a county. Newport News is not in a county. Neither is Norfolk, Hampton. Ironically, Richmond is in Henrico County. St. Louis, for a long time, the city operated as if it was a county. So it's going to have county type records. So you have to understand the jurisdiction that you're at. And again, this is an overall. I'm going to hit some things with Texas, but this is kind of overall. When I've given this presentation live and I tell people, you know, this stuff, people come up and go, well, you still didn't tell me how to find the probate court in my courthouse. I don't know. I haven't been in your courthouse. I can't answer that, you know? But we're going to talk about in general how to get around and what we're going to do. And these are just some of the types of records you might find in there. And most of this is not anything new. I put an asterisk by vital records because some places like Indiana has moved all vital records out of the courthouses over to the health department, and they make it very difficult to see it. I went in there to look at the, I just wanted to look at the index for the death, and they wouldn't let me. They want to type me up a new death certificate. Like, first off, if you type that up, that is no longer primary. That is now secondary because you might make a mistake. So they Xerox the page and put these papers down to block it out so I could only see the one line. And it wasn't my guy anyway. But bear in mind, the vital records may be different places, but a lot of times the historic ones are still in county courthouses. Again, take this as a guideline, not absolute, because every state is different. Counties are set up a little bit different and jurisdictions. But there's always a requirement for record retention. That is a federal law. Government entities must have some kind of record retention plan that says how long they're going to keep it there before they transfer it somewhere else. So, you know, large place like Dallas County and surrounding, they may not keep it at their courthouse. They may transfer it to the state archives or a local historical society, or they may just have an offsite place. So we're going to talk more about this, and as part of the checklist I gave you, you want to contact them ahead of time to see if they're going to have the record you want available. Typical areas of modern courthouse, you have your superior magistrate court, probate court, although some states don't call it probate. Some call it others, depending on the law, like Louisiana, is the succession. Some places have a recorder's court. I didn't start my timer. I can keep track. While these lands typically fall under the purview of the Superior Court, some places have it in a recorder's court, like Colorado. But we're going to talk about the records we want to look at, not so much the courts. Superior Court, like I said, major cases, major civil actions, typically land in deeds. Although, like I said, Colorado has it in a recorder's court. So maybe a little bit different. Magistrate's court usually deals with minor criminal issues, preliminary hearings, civil claims, and may not always be in front of a judge, but these may hold records about your family that you're researching. Municipal, again, minor lawsuit. So I'm working on a case now for a client. He shows up in Georgia between 1821 and about 1832 when he disappears and presumed dead. About the only government records we find him on is the tax records and court. He is suing or being sued constantly. His son said that he was born in South Carolina, so now I go to look for this guy, Abner Bishop, in South Carolina, and there's a lot of them. But lo and behold, in Lorenz County, South Carolina, there's an Abner Bishop suing and being sued by people over a 15-year period. I think it's the same guy. People overlook lawsuits. We want to look at everything we can. As you heard, I did 23 years of uniform. I went in the late 70s, and up until the early 80s, they were telling us to file a copy of our DD 214. For those that don't know what that is, that's our discharge with the local courthouse, because it was easier if you lost it to get it from them than it was the VA. Then they discovered this thing called identity theft. But to this day, many courthouses will hold old DD 214s. So if you know where they separated from the service prior to 1980, check the courthouse if you can find it. And Recorder's Court also had a record of sales. Anything that somebody wants to make sure that there's an official government record for, can file it with a courthouse in their Recorder's Court. In Texas, the county clerk holds the deeds, mortgages, and most land records, but you also have district courts that handle divorces, land disputes, and name changes. You also have a constitutional county court that handles these type of cases, especially in large counties like Dallas, Behar, Travis. And you still have a justice of the peace court, okay, handling small claims. So different courts, different places. But when we start talking historically, you might find inferior court. You might see JPIC, Justice of the Peace of the Inferior Court. Here in Georgia, we have what's called a Court of Conscience, and we'll come back to that. Court of Chancery, and that one's still used. I believe it's North Carolina and maybe others. I haven't delved into all 50 states. You might have what's called the Court of Equity. So don't get hung up on the court name, get hung up on the records. So I'm going to come back to the Court of Conscience. My ancestor that moved us to Georgia was named Gilshot Thomas. Gilshot because his mother's maiden name was Gail Schiot. His maternal grandfather was Lars Gail Schiot from Denmark, 1680, over on this continent, early 1700s. But in this Court of Conscience record is a story, this lawsuit, the plaintiff being Gilshot against Isaac Cartwright. Plaintiff complained that the defendant took a bell off of his horse and produced Arthur Shadler as a witness, who, after being sworn, said he was in the company with Isaac in the swamp and heard him say that he was going to take the bell off the horse belonging to Gilshot, and that he heard it hit the water, the Savannah River. Went on to say that when this season of crops was over, he was going to take his wallet of tobacco, his tomahawk, and go live off of Gilshot Thomas's land, where he had a lot of wild hogs. So a lot of the problems with wild hogs in Georgia is my ancestors' fault. Well, he had to pay money. Somebody had to step up and produce money that said he's going to be a good boy for the next 6 months. But this Court of Conscience is just full of funny stories of lawsuits. We want to put skin on the bones. We want to know more than just when they were born, when they died, when they got married. We want to know stuff about them. And I found this hilarious. And there's another one that talks about his sons. So you might want to look into these. There's a lot of good information. When we talk about probate court, we want to get beyond just the will. So this was the will of Ambrose Watson, and he named his one adult son, and everybody else are minors. Well, how do we prove the other children? Well, it turns out he wrote this in 1860. His son that he made executor died in 1862 during the Civil War, not married, no children. So the rest of the siblings sued their brother's estate. It was a legal maneuver that put everything back in court. And this dragged on for years. So I tracked all the females. I could, get my proof that I needed. You're going to see guardianship papers. You're going to see vouchers. And you're going to find marriage records. And this one says, I do certify that Richard Foster and Winnie Meeks were lawfully joined together by me this 14th day of May in the year 1848. These are all typically found in the probate court section. Now, the original meaning of probate means to record. That's all. Then it kind of morphed into the procedures to prove a will. And like I said, in Louisiana and other states, it's called succession. But all aspects of an estate, okay? Maybe different terms in different states, but the concept is the same. Typically, we find probate court has the vital records, the old birth certificates, and birth registers in some cases. I'll show you one. Marriage license and applications. Now, I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm always learning things. So I was down in Macon a number of years ago doing work, because I also do forensic research for law firms. And I'm looking for this girl, Corker was her last name. She's 2 years old in 1910. She's 12 years old in 1920. She's listed as Corker. Then I lose her. Well, she gets married, but I'm trying to find her in between because she's got a daughter that could, lead me to a potential heir that I have to find that might be entitled to the money. And my good friend who runs the library down there, Muriel Jackson, she goes, go get the application. I went, what? She goes, this is after 1900. There's an application on file. It's going to tell you more about her. Well, I pulled it and come to find out she wasn't a corker. Her mother was pregnant when her biological father died. Mama remarried and she just grew up as a corker, but she wasn't legally a corker. It was in the application. You might find marriage bonds during COVID when there was nothing better to do than get in your car and drive around the block. I went page by page through the Liberty County, Georgia court records, and I found the marriage bonds. Now, Gilshot's, one of his sons was James, but proving James to his sons was based on indirect evidence. When I found direct evidence, because I found the marriage bonds. And I've got bands in here, and you won't find bands in a courthouse. Bands was done by the church in the newspapers. But I put this there to kind of remind you, you might have marriage bonds, where the man had to post a bond saying it was a legal marriage, or it may be marriage bands that was run through a church newspaper for so many weeks, announcing the marriage to make sure it was legit. Certificates, death certificates, death registers, even mortuary records, coroner records. Judy Russell has a course on coroner records, and she's giving it, I think, in November someplace. I just saw. These are records that might give us the information we want. And if you didn't know, the census mortality schedule will link you directly back to the family. I've got a whole class on vital records and stuff, but it will link you back to the family so you can know for sure that this John Smith came out of that family. But what if you find a marriage license issued, but it wasn't recorded? Well, now you have to look and see if they lived as husband and wife. Not every marriage license got properly recorded, and sometimes they just don't exist. My great grandfather, I'll show you a thing on him later. He was married 3 times. First wife died in childbirth. Second wife, we say, died from too many baby syndrome. And then he married a 3rd time. Well, I've got the first and third. The second marriage license from the late 1880s just simply does not exist. I was down in Eatonton, Georgia 2 days ago looking for a marriage record that just doesn't exist. Mortuary registers can help show an epidemic. The birth registers might show other children born between the census that died. So you want to get in and you want to look at anything you can. And birth registers are typically not digitized and put online. Okay? Okay, typical probate court in a typical small rural county. Absolutely unlike Dallas County. So I have a distant cousin, Judge Tony Thompson. He's the probate judge down in Candler. And he sent me some pictures. And he called me panicking that 30 people were going to show up. No, they weren't coming. We're up in northern Georgia and he's in southern. But you're going to walk into a court, and where those records are, it is a vault. It may look like an ordinary room, but I guarantee you it is fireproof. We just had a fire at Washington County Library, the courthouse recently, and haven't heard yet if any of the records were damaged. But it's a vault. I mentioned birth register, so here's my father's 2 oldest sisters, Eula May and Thelma. They're in the register. Right below Thelma is Myrtle. Now, I know there was a Myrtle, but that's 20 years too early, and that didn't belong to my family. That's just another Thomas. But we can find these. Sometimes we have to look a little deeper. This is my father's birth certificates, plural. There are actually 2 of them, fully all in the records. And the first one is wrong. The second one on bottom, that's correct. Now, we always celebrated the 24th of January, and he always spelled his name ODIS. But there's actually 2, so you may need to go look harder when you're pulling them. Again, the birth register, there he is. So it was still ODIS. How did this happen? I don't know. I have no idea. My grandfather bragged that he delivered all 7 children on his farm. So now I get to make up a story that goes like this. He went to town. He did the birth certificate, that first one, came back, showed my grandmother, who promptly slapped him upside the head and told him to go do it again and do it right this time. I don't know how this happened. I gave this is Baxley, Georgia. That's Baxley County. I was there, Appling County. County seat is Baxley. I was there in January and did the same class. And one of the ladies came up to me and she goes, I have 2 birth certificates. So sometimes you have to dig deep. Now, Judy Russell said probably less than 25% of people who died actually had an estate. They just didn't have anything. Okay? So don't be surprised if there's no estate. Now, testate versus intestate. And I prefer intestate because testate means there's a will and it was accepted. Intestate means either there was no will and you have an administrator, or there was a will and it got thrown out. So I work in one case, and this was early 1800s. So the wife was entitled to her dower. That meant she was entitled to 1/3 of his estate. Well, he wrote her completely out of the will. He wrote it so that she got nothing. Named his 2 best friends as executors. And the next entry is proven in open court. They brought in the will and recorded it. The next entry are the 2 guys going, hands up, we're not touching this one with a 10-foot pole. Next entry, the widow is suing the estate. She wants her money. Okay? You've got to dig in there. An intestate will typically, it was typical to the law to have to name every heir, where the will, as I already mentioned, I'm going to show again, may not. There's also a thing called a non-cupative will, which is the person that's dying calls in a bunch of people and verbally says, this is what I want done with my estate. They write it down and they take it to court, and it may or may not be accepted. But you might want to check surrounding counties too. So I was asked to run down to Meriwether County, not too far from me, to pull a will from a county that had a courthouse disaster, probably a burn. She owned property in Meriwether County when she died. Therefore, there would be a record in Meriwether County of the will and the court order naming the executor entitled to sell that property. So you want to check surrounding counties just to see if they own property there. Never, never, never stop at the will. You want to read every scrap of paper that's in there. And I'm going to show you a book that tells you what you can look for. But there are all these possible things that you might find from a single estate. The authorization, letters of administration, or appointment as the executor or executrix. They posted a bond. There might be guardianship. There might be. I helped a client get into the Jamestown Society when the lineage was accepted by even DAR, which has very strict standards. And I'm talking to the genealogist for the Jamestown Society, and he's like, there has to be guardianship. Mazzy and the others were children. I said, it doesn't have to be anything. The man who died named his wife and brother as co-executors. His brother, besides being the chief judge of the county, was also Speaker of the House for the state of Georgia. He was in the Georgia legislature. He just plain didn't do the paperwork. The final return, that's where the money is actually, or whatever it is actually given out to the heirs. He didn't do that either. So, and one client I'm working on, we still don't know. Oh, the Richard Foster I showed you, we have no idea who his father was. We now know his mother was in Edenfield because he is accepting his grandchild portion of a David Edenfield. You want to look at all papers in an estate. And this is a typical docket that shows the different things that are in that and where to go look. But here's the key thing. So the fourth entry there, request permission to rent out the property, is in Minute Book C, pages 40 and 41, but that's a transcription of the original. You want to find the original. So it's going to tell you what's available, what's in there. And in this one, 2 sons and a son-in-law of William Tyndall, who is deceased, comes into court and caveats the proving of the will of granting. They're contesting the will. And they're saying, secondly, that the testator was not of sound mind and memory. Thirdly, that said will was made through fear and flattery, or that the deceased had made a former will and had made an equal distribution of all his real and personal property to his children, and said that he never intended to make any other will. I love contested court ones. I did one in 1860, it was right around 1860. His one and only son moves back home with his wife to help take care of the farm. Dad rewrote his will, giving the son 1,000 acres and telling the 4 daughters to split 250 acres. One daughter said, "You're never going to enjoy it," and fought her brother in court all the way to federal court in Alabama for 30 years. So contested estates are fun to read. Here we've got 4 kids, orphan children of William Tyndall, same guy, and they're requesting Darcy Adams to be their guardian. Well, this tells us they're over 14. At age 14, and this is still true as far as I know in all 50 states, this District of Columbia, etc., 14-year-olds can pick their guardian. So you might see this. Annual return. Every year that a state is open, been there, done that as an executor, you have to file with the court the status and what's going on. And you have to identify and show proof that you're maintaining for all the minor children. So this is my great-great-grandfather's estate. And all of a sudden, one daughter is missing. Well, she fired her mom as her guardian and hired her father-in-law. She's 14 years old, married. And her father-in-law became the guardian. And it said, shows to the court that she is 14 years of age, that she is not satisfied with her present guardian and desires her removal, and wishes the court to appoint as guardian of her person and property, Henry A. Bennett, who consents. Now, her mother was ordered to come into court if she wanted to contest it. There's no proof of that. And I was talking to Judy Russell about this. I said, I found this one interesting. She goes, go look, I bet they sold property right after that got taken care of. So you want to watch for minors going into court to contest change guardianship. Now, I mentioned the docket. So this is my great-grandfather, General Jackson Thomas. General was his name. It took over 10 years to close his estate. There's all these records out there. And I'm talking about loose papers. Sometimes we don't know when they died. A lot of people use the date they signed their will. I signed my will several years ago. I'm still alive and kicking, thank you very much. But if you find in the loose papers where they ordered a casket, guess what? They died yesterday, the day before probably. So you want to look for these. And where you're going to typically find them is either those drawers that you see on the right, or a lot of places have actually moved these into hanging file folders. So again, I was down in Meriwether for another client, and the docket said they had papers, loose papers on these 2 sons of the former sheriff. And I was trying to prove that the guy I was researching was not the son of the sheriff, which everybody thinks he is, or was, but he wasn't. But the folders are totally empty. And I'm talking to the probate judge, and I don't want to say somebody stole them, but this is kind of suspicious that the 2 brothers, their folders are empty. And it's like, who would want to steal anything out of a courthouse? And one of course says, Your Honor, I had to stop a woman from ripping a page out of the marriage book, because after Grandma died, Grandpa did not marry that woman. Judge was kind of taken back. But I also pointed out that they were missing one whole minute book C2, 17 years worth of records gone. The reason nobody knew it is minute book C1, somebody took white out and whited out the -1. I showed them a 17-year gap, Sometimes things go missing and we have to look wherever we can. So Richard Ricks, in his estate, his devisees, which is his heirs, he only lists minor children. Sometimes they only list the children by their current wife because the other children have been taken care of. We want to prove that Daniel H. is the son of Richard. How are we going to do that? Well, it turns out Caswell was 12 years old when the will was written. He died 2 years later. One of the brother-in-laws was appointed administrator and didn't do something he was supposed to do. So again, they sued him. The plaintiffs, and these are all the siblings, and they're saying we are the sibling of and the heir of Caswell. And if there are the siblings of Caswell and right to inherit from Caswell, and Caswell we know is the son of Richard, I've just proven Daniel H. is the son of Richard. This is how I get a lot of people in lineage societies. It just, you want to look at the whole thing. Probate, look at the disbursements. Like I said, the David Enfields, the children got I think about $180. The grandkids all got $18. It'll tell you who's alive and who's dead. Let's spend a lot of time on probate because this is where you find a lot of good information, but we were going to look at some other records. These are books from the Candler County Courthouse, and this is where they were found, in the attic. That huge pile of records, never digitized, not online, now available for people to go look at. Land office. This lists all the land transfers, deeds, mortgages. You want to look at both the grantor and the grantee. And don't be dismayed because of the courthouse disaster. I went to the Cobb County Courthouse where I live for a client, and I said, I need to look for some land records before the Civil War. We ain't got them. Yeah, you do. No, we don't. Yes, you do. Give me your 3 oldest books. I didn't find the one I wanted, but I pulled the whole staff over. I said, let me educate you on something. Everybody who owned land during the Civil War and the courthouse was burnt had to prove they owned it before they could sell it. So here's an entry that says originally filed in 1838, refiled in 1869. Originally filed in 1843, refiled in 1871. They had to come in and prove they owned it. And you want to look for various spellings. Now, the thing that I hate the most is when during the 1930s, the WPA came in and typed up a lot of these old records, and they threw out the originals. And it's so easy to skip a line. I was looking for one. I would have to go through every book to find the record because it just did not make it into the index. I saw where he bought it, never saw where he sold it. But you want to look, and you want to look at every name on that deed too, because especially the historic ones, if you're working the colonial time frame, you're going to see chain carrier. It's usually a teenager, a young man who may or may not be family. Hopefully they are. So we want to look for the whole thing. And again, look to the grantor and the grantee, because if it got missed in the grantor, hopefully they showed up in the grantee. Besides their property they owned and lived on, you might find out that they were an officer or a trustee of something. General Jackson Thomas was the worshipful master for his Masons group, and they bought property to build a new building on. You want to look for things like et al., which means and others, because this is going to show you that these aren't all the names. There's more names when you actually go to the deed. So if it might not have your person's name, but it's got a sibling and et al., you definitely want to go look at it. Or it might be that they're just part of it could be the estate, it could be churches, some civil organizations. Sheriff sales are challenging because let's say my property is confiscated for a lawsuit or unpaid taxes, and the sheriff sells it. It might be listed under Thomas, my name, or it may be listed under the name of the sheriff. So you have to know who the sheriff is. And over, I don't remember, if it was a 6, 7, 8 year period, you had Sheriff 1, the Sheriff 2, the Sheriff 1 came back. And that's where I had to find it because that's how they listed it, by the sheriff's last name. You never know. Now, speaking of unique things you find, Joel Jackson's third wife was a widow who already had some children, had 2 daughters, one died. The story I'm told is she looked at him and said, "I'm not a baby making factory," packed up and left. Okay, I want some legal documents. It's in the deeds. Witnesses that said party of the first part has this day made the following agreement with the party of the second part, that's Joel Jackson and Mrs. Unity Thomas, that whereas they have this day agreed to live in a state of separation, and in order to settle any and all claims that she may have against him and his estate for herself and her minor child, to wit, Murtis Thomas. Who would think to look in the land records for a legal separation decree? That's where it is. Tax records. Everybody pays tax. You want to look at the property tax? You want to look at the poll tax? You want to look at business license tax? There's a lot of places to look and a lot of good things on taxes. Now, I heard in the early announcements, the Texas Genealogical Society's 2-day conference in November, and there's this outstanding speaker named Larry Thomas giving a class on the tax man cometh. So if you want to know more about taxes, watch that one. But in many cases, tax records were stored somewhere else. So don't assume they're gone just because the courthouse was burnt. You never know. And taxes will help you in so many ways track people over time as they age in, as they age out. There's just so much in taxes. And the poll tax, particularly, you aged in and you aged out. And that goes back to long before the Civil War. That was just men of a certain age, for the right to consume air, they had to pay a tax on it. If you're a person of interest owned a business, there's going to be a business tax. There might be business records available at the courthouse or at the archives or someplace. You want to look for these. Appling County, again, where my father, grandfather, great-grandfather, their tax records, property taxes, it was like a 14-inch ledger book. When you open it up, that's like 28 inches, and one entry for one person went all the way across. Courthouse was about to throw it away. Historical Society said, "We'll be more than happy to take those." There's a lot of information in the taxes. Suggest you go look for them. When you're out doing research, you want to make sure you take a picture of the binder. If you're going to take a picture of a page so you remember where it came from. Now, this is marriage records, 1833 to 1865, Paulding County, which is a mile and a half to my left. This is marriage book, page 157. But that's treasurer information. For some reason, there's like 30 pages of the marriage book that the finance person was keeping entries in. You never know what you're going to find looking through these books, but I encourage you to go do it. Now, like I said, that those ledgers are big, they're heavy. If you have never been in one, and I was down in Dodge County on this particular day. I did my Pro-Gen course. I decided to run down to Dodge County because I needed some records, and I didn't do what I preach. Plan ahead, call them. Because as soon as I pulled in at 9:30 in the morning, the first thing I noticed was no cars. The second thing I noticed was no American flag. The sign on the door said, "Closed indefinitely by the health department." Yeah, now what am I going to do? Well, the sign also said, things were over at the Chamber of Commerce. They took a big room in the Chamber of Commerce, and when you walked in, on the immediate right was traffic court, then over another aisle section was land and deeds, and then you had probate, and you had, they were all in one big room. And I was able to get some of the information. I was talking to the lady that works there because I've been down to Dodge several times. That's my father's mother's family was from Dodge County. I looked at one of the clerk. I said, I got to tell you, I talk about your daughter whenever I get this class. And she kind of looked at me funny, like, okay, you weirdo. I said, well, a year ago, I was down around Thanksgiving and school was out, and you had your daughter here. She wanted to help. She was in that back room with me, and she really wanted to help. And I was trying to explain to her, these books are big, and they're heavy, and they're old. This book I'm holding here is 150 years old when it was written. Her eyes got real big, her mouth chopped up, and she's like, did you write it? Yeah, we both chuckled. And she's like, she doesn't have a governor on her mouth. I'm like, yeah, neither do I. But those books are big. They are heavy. That's why I recommend using index books if you can from your local library, so you know which one to go to. But you want to look at all the pages around it. Make sure, because if the will or the land or whatever is on page 157, it may continue into 158, 159, 160. And I tell people, and I think I've got it in the handouts I gave you, you want to scan that document. You want to read it really quickly, because if it references another book, you want to look at the other book while you're at the courthouse. You don't want to get home and go, oh, nuts, I should have gone over. And, newspaper abstracts might help you locate possible legal records, especially any kind of criminal case, any kind of lawsuit. They usually would list them in the records. So you know to go look for it. Looking at criminal courts can sometimes be more challenging because it typically is only listed plaintiff, civil court, plaintiff and defendant, criminal court, the defendant. So you don't know if a person gave testimony. You don't know if they were a witness. You might find they were a juror. And if they were a juror, they were male over 21 in the old days. Nowadays, it's different. But in the old days, it was a male over 21. Just by being on the jury list. Road work list. It's all in the court minutes where the citizens were basically ordered, the men were ordered to go help build a road. There's so much. I mean, I could go on for a long, long time, but you need to know that there's a lot of records in there. Some courthouses use very unique indexing. You're going to have to look at that index. Some of them are really, really wild and challenging. I've got a course just on that. Because you would say Thomas T. No. You skip the T, you go to the H. It's strange indexing sometimes. There's a book in your handouts by Rose, Miss Rose. She goes through a lot of that. But what you want to do is when you walk in, nowadays, I say the first clerk, nowadays you walk in, the first person you're going to see is the deputy sheriff, probably go through a metal detector. Tell them what you want. When you call, ask what you can bring. Small county court the court is in session, may not let you bring your phone in. And some are strictly online electronic records. Now, going back to what happened when I went to Dodge County. So I was looking, but they didn't have all the books I needed. And I got to talk to the probate judge. And I said, yeah, my girlfriend's going to laugh because I didn't practice what I preached. I just jumped in the car and drove. And a couple of the books I need are not here. And you have to understand, it's not their job to help you find documents, but be dressing nicely and talking nicely to the judge. He's like, well, when you're finished, do you know which books you want? I said, yeah, Your Honor, I do. He goes, the page? Yes, I do. He's like, can you take pictures on your phone? Yes, Your Honor, I can. He goes, okay, when we're done, or you're done, we'll go over to the old courthouse. I will go in and get you the pictures. Well, we get to the courthouse and get out of the car, and he looks left and he looks right. And he looks left again and he looks right again. Like, do you see any deputies? I said, no, Your Honor, I don't see any deputies. He goes, neither do I. Come on, let's go. And in the courthouse we went. He took me. And I was able to get what I needed. They don't have to do that. But the nicer you are, the nicer they'll be. Appling County, the birth register and the loose papers, they keep saying you're not allowed to see it. Yeah, watch me. It's public record. By law, it's public record. They have to. So don't let them try to tell you otherwise. Now, some of these I mentioned, like the last bullet, they've strictly gone electronic. I don't know about Dallas County, but two of the counties here in the Atlanta area, you're not going to see that original unless when you pull it up on the computer, it's not legible. And you have to show the clerk it's not legible. I want the original. Then they'll get you the original. Otherwise, you're not going to see that. It's all electronic now. I was in Chambers County, Alabama for a client not too long ago. 15-foot ceilings now. Where I'm standing right now is my house. The front of the house was built in 1920. I have 12-foot ceilings. Those were 15. I climbed up that rickety ladder to get me a ledger book. Turned out not to have it. Now, for them, everything is in there. Land, probate, everything. All the old ledger books are in that one room. So, I'm looking at that stuff, and the judge comes in. He's a young man, early 40s, real nice, pleasant guy. I got talking to him and told him the name I was researching because I wasn't fighting anything, and he went and checked his judge records, whatever those are. Came back and said he didn't find anything either. Like, anything else I can do for you? I said, Your Honor, to be honest, I don't feel comfortable climbing back up that ladder. If you've got some guy around here, he goes, leave it there. I'll put it up myself. They don't have to do this. But again, the more polite we are, the more polite they are. I had a judge sitting on the floor going through tax records with me. And interesting enough, the will of James Beasley says his daughter Polly. Well, everybody said Polly was also Nancy. It was the tax records, and the judge found it sitting on the floor that proved Polly and Nancy were the same people. Okay. Sometimes they're bored in the courthouses too, but it's worth looking. I was in one courthouse and I needed the very, very first land book for the county, and we couldn't find it. I got a clerk. We're looking. Clerk goes and talks to the judge. The judge comes in and she's cradling this book like a baby. It was so fragile. I said, Your Honor, with your permission, I'll give you the name and let you open the book and look for it. It wasn't in the index, but you have to look. So some of these books are very old and fragile. Some of them, places like recently I worked with Rita Moore episode for Finding Your Roots. That county courthouse, you walk into where the records are, they're handing you gloves. They're not the white cloth gloves. They're more like latex, not latex, but that other synthetic stuff. They're going to make you wear gloves. So you have to be prepared. We're winding down here. Recommended reading, like I mentioned. Christine Rose has the two books. A lot of good information on the index. And I gave you some handouts. I gave you a checklist. And I gave you kind of a breakdown for Texas. And we're going to finish about 4 minutes early. I am a member of the Association of Professional Genealogists. As mentioned, I'm the president of the Genealogical Speakers Guild. So if you know people in other societies looking for speakers, please go to the guild. We got big names like Judy Russell. We got nobodies like me. I just kid. I do have a blog going. You can hit me up on my email. Advice is free. Research costs money. And I appreciate the time. I'm going to turn it back over for questions.
Well, we'll start with the online group. So I see we had one question there, Paul, or Amy, you want to handle that?
There was a question about newspaper abstracts, and I went ahead and replied a little bit, but you mentioned one of your slides that newspaper abstracts were something that you wanted to dig into. Are they different than actual copies of a newspaper?
So in some places, people like here in Georgia, particularly guy Ted Brooks, he did short abstracts of articles of genealogical work and published them in books. So you may find books like that where they've done a little abstract, and then now you know which newspaper to go look for.
So it's more of a summary of what the newspaper said or something to.
Yeah, it's like a sentence or two, so that you can go find the newspaper article and read the whole article. And when I teach, my favorite class I teach is how not to do genealogy. I'm like, never trust an abstract. I was on a wild goose chase for 2 years because I believed the abstract. That's one of the dumb mistakes I made as a rookie.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I just want to have you clarify something. You mean to tell me that you went into the courthouses and went to the recorder of deeds or the register of wills and a judge was in there helping you with the records?
On more than one occasion.
Okay, yeah, I've only ever dealt with clerks who work there.
I think in some of these rural courthouses, the judges get bored. But when I was talking to a Meriwether is such a small, poor community. He is the probate judge. He's the traffic judge. He's the small claims judge. I can't remember the fourth position. He held 4 positions.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, very good. So you mentioned mortuary records, birth registers, et cetera. So I have family that's in Tarrant County, Texas. And so when I went looking for birth records, I found some online reference within the county website that said they had birth records back to 1908. And yet when I went to the courthouse, they said, oh, no, we don't have anything that far back. So do you ever run into a case? You mentioned that they will say you can't see them or no, we don't have them, but I can't imagine that they would have put it on their website if it weren't accurate.
Yeah, sometimes I find clerks that don't want to do their job. Unfortunately, Fulton County, which is a good part of Atlanta, they'll type it up and they go, we don't have it. I'm like, give me the old ledger books. And then we find it. But now they move the old ledger books to their county archive building and get the somebody there to actually do their job is challenging. We go with whatever we can find. But that's also why I say call ahead. So I was just doing some work for a law firm out of Savannah who asked me to get the historic records, some of which were in Savannah. I had to hire somebody down there, a colleague, but they knew enough to call ahead so that the books could be moved from their storage facility to the courthouse to be looked at. The other ones, because they were going back to the King's Grant of 1757, King's Grant, 1767. And I know my archives, I know the people there. They're like, yeah, you ain't touching that one. We'll digitize it for you. Thank you very much. Because it's just too fragile. But it is frustrating when it online says they have it, and then you get to it and like, no, we don't.
It looks like we had a question from Georges Paulson. Do you want to ask your question? Oh, he was just off mute. So that's the only questions we had from a Zoom land.
Somebody wrote in here about Dodge County. I haven't been back down there to find out if they've reopened it. Hopefully you all had breakfast and you have good stomachs. It was closed by the health department because of pigeon droppings. So I haven't been back down to Dodge to see if it's reopened. No other questions?
That's interesting.
Yep.
That the health department would go in and look at the records or wherever, huh?
I understood them to say they closed the courthouse, not just the records.
Yeah,
Before-
okay, so there could have been
Yeah.
Yeah, the courthouse, the health department closed the courthouse building. So if they didn't reopen, they would have gotten everything out and moved somewhere else. I just haven't been back down to Dodge. I don't get a whole lot of time to research my own family because I'm so busy researching for other people. I mean, I mentioned I was in Eatonton the other day. That was a 2.5 hour drive there and 2.5 hour drive back.
Is that all?
I hope
Wow.
this has been helpful.
It sure has. Larry,
Okay.
let's give everyone a round of applause for Larry. I never thought that one of the big takeaways would be beware of pigeon droppings, but apparently that That is a real thing. Just as a reminder, October 5th is close upon us, and that, of course, is when the early registration ends for our October fall seminar. So please don't forget that. And with that, I will be closing today's meeting. Once again, a thank you to Larry. We look forward to seeing you at the fall seminar.
Thank you much.
This has been a production of the Dallas Genealogical Society. If you're already a member, thank you. Your fees have been supporting these and other society activities. If you're not yet a member, please consider joining now. Go to dallasgenealogy.org and click on the membership tab.